Back in March on this channel, I have made the claim that I have found the greatest sports anime of all time in Yuri on Ice. Is there another contender for this particular title? I believe there is. What's up everybody, my name is Danger Doug and today we're talking about Haikyuu, and specifically the first season of Haikyuu. Now Haikyuu's received critical acclaim from a lot of different organizations including IGN, Crunchyroll, and Polygon, who have all named it as one of the top animes of the 2010s. This 25 episode shonen sports anime, which centers around a volleyball team, was adapted from a manga series written by Haruichi Furudate and was released for television in 2014. The show itself has been licensed in North America by Sentai Filmworks and is available for streaming on multiple platforms in the US and Canada and several different places including Netflix, Hulu, Crunchyroll, YouTube, even YouTube. Now, although I personally watched this one on Crunchyroll myself, again, you can find it on a multitude of platforms here and there, but that's also a testament to the demand of this anime here and there by a wide number of audiences. Now, for me personally, it's one of those things here and there where I'm not a big sports anime fan. I mean, I've watched Yuri on Ice and several of the different ones here and there, but at the same time, it's one of those types of situations where I don't exactly like to kind of go out of my way to watch a sports anime, but this one really changed my mind. And don't get me wrong, volleyball is a huge part of this anime. As a matter of fact, they go over a lot of the different volleyball rules and stuff, and they go over different things that you need to know as an audience, but that's not the center of the story. At the center of its story, Haikyuu is a character-driven anime. It's something that celebrates a lot of its characters, and although there's a multitude of those ones, and even before we get into our character analysis section, this one over here has a multitude of different characters, but every single one of them makes sense and is so wonderful to watch on screen. I find that a lot of the struggles that they go through themselves is particularly well done in this anime because a lot of the stuff that's presented to us is an internalization of a lot of the stuff that they're feeling, and the way that it's presented to us is there to give us a little bit of a feel as to what the characters are going through at that given moment. So as we get into our characters section of this particular review, I am going to say that I'm only going to go over two peoples here and there as far as the cast list, and again, there's a multitude of peoples here and there in the volleyball team, and also their coaching and staff and several of the other teams here and there too. You will see from me just about two people that I'm going to be covering that one, and the first one is going to be Shoyo Hinata. Even though Hinata basically embodies the entire trope here and there about the fiery protagonist who's all, just says what's on his mind at any given moment and just kind of like goes for it, like head first into any situation, Hinata has multiple layers here and there to him, as we find out as we watch the show. We find out that as a kid, Hinata is very inspired by this one volleyball player that was coined the Little Giant here and there by a lot of his peers and also the press at the time, as being like this crazy wing spiker from Karasuno High School who was just absolutely dominating at the game. Hinata would watch a lot of his matches here and there and get fired up here and there about all the stuff that he was able to do despite being a shorter person here and there, kind of like he was. So he kind of goes around his own school here and there trying to galvanize a lot of his students to go start a volleyball team. And as the show progresses, we see a lot of his own talents here and there come to the forefront as Hinata works his ass off literally to become one of the best volleyball players that he can be, despite his limitations with having not so much of a good infrastructure as far as having his school with volleyball courts and stuff like that. He just plainly makes do with what he's got at his disposal. We see Hinata's passion for the sport of volleyball and also his desire to be the best player that he can be just come to the forefront during the show, but there's one character that he forms an early rivalry in the show that actually carries over into his acceptance into Karasuno High School, and that is Tobio Kageyama. Tobio Kageyama, as far as volleyball is concerned, is considered to be one of the best setters in the entire region. Kageyama has one significant problem with the rest of his team that kind of puts him at odds with the other players, in that he's known as the king of the court, who essentially is just a dictatorial personality that's telling people what to do and how to play. And despite the fact that he is probably one of the best players, he's one of those guys who, his personality just clashes with the other members of the team, and he's not so accepted here and there for his calls and whatnot, and eventually, even at one point in time in a flashback in the show, his team just outright turns its back on him entirely. Now, Kageyama meets Hinata in one of their meetings here and there before they get accepted into high school and whatnot, where even though Kageyama's team soundly defeats Hinata's team, sorry, minor spoilers there, essentially he finds that when they do get into high school together that, oh shit, we're on the same volleyball team now, so despite the fact that we had a rivalry even beforehand, we now have to play nice together. And again, the show has a multitude of different characters from different players here and there too, the coaches and the staff here and there. that have their own personalities to be sure, but most of the screen time that's in this anime is actually devoted to those two, Hinata and Kageyama. So as first years in the high school volleyball team, they're kind of seen as the new guys in this whole thing, and the upperclassmen that they do have over here in the school kind of put them to the test a little bit, which essentially means that, oh yeah, Hinata and Kageyama, you now have to work together in order for you guys to make the team. And there's a whole scene here and there too where you have Hinata and Kageyama kind of going over their own internal inhibitions here and there of each other as to whether or not they can actually work together. But then they start to see like a little bit of a change in both of them to where they bring a lot of their strengths to the forefront and it actually works out super well for them. And as I mentioned beforehand about this being a very character-driven anime, it's one of those things where as newer players get added to the roster here and there throughout the first few episodes, you get to see a lot of their stories come to the forefront, but also what Haikyuu does better than a lot of other shows that I've seen here and there in the past is that it does give meaningful, really good and meaningful flashbacks. Some shows here and there take an entire episode to give a character a flashback of like some sort of like thing about their past and tell the story there. Haikyuu doesn't really have time for that, being only 25 episodes, so they do it in just a couple of minutes. But the way that they place those flashbacks here and there with them playing volleyball, whether it's in practice or in an exhibition match, is huge. It totally reinforces what that character is going through, whether it's their own internal struggles or whether it's like self-doubt or something that they're going through at the time. And it does so beautifully, and it's one of those things where you could give like a 1 to 2 minute flashback sequence, and right before they're about to hit that spike, you know exactly what that character is feeling. And it's one of those things where it conveys that really good for them, the characters, but also seeing it as a member of the audience, like us, the viewers watching it, we start to understand exactly what their motivations are, where they fit in, and feel all the same feelings that they are, whether it's, again, self-doubt, different struggles that they're going through, different emotions here and there about whether or not they can actually do it. But again, as from a character standpoint, it really, really nails it in this one. Even a lot of the players that they go up against here and there from the other high schools, they also kind of take their time here and there to kind of give you a little bit of backstory information about those characters. And it's one of those things where, do you need to know a character's life story? No, but do you need to know something about who they are and how they got to that point, what their motivations were even beforehand? Yes. And one of those examples is Oikawa, who's essentially one of the biggest rivals of Kageyama as far as the setter is concerned. The show goes over Oikawa's backstory here and there as Kageyama's senior and shows exactly like what his internal struggles were, even like leading up to where he's been in with high school. And it's one of those things where you get to see the rivalry between the two of them as they face each other here and there in the court. But we do get to see a lot of those moments and flashbacks here and there about how Kageyama really looked up to him as his junior. And it's one of those things that Haikyuu does really well, is having not only a really good backstory for all of its characters, but also a good history and interaction here and there between a lot of the characters from their pre-high school days leading up to this moment. And not only that, but the significance of that moment is really put to the forefront. And it's one of those things where if you played organized sports in either middle school or high school, you feel kind of the same things that they're going through here and there. You may not necessarily know your teammates perfectly as you get on the court for the first time, but you find out a whole lot more about them as you kind of go throughout time. And that's another thing that Haikyuu does brilliantly, is that even though when you go through several different matches here and there from other schools and whatnot, you start to learn and grow together here and there with the show, as a lot of the other characters are also doing that on screen. And again, cannot give enough praise for the character ensemble that was put together for this particular anime, and for the entirety of like how they actually did it in terms of putting their backstories out there, showing the significance of each moment. And it's one of those things where, again, probably one of the best like character ensembles that you'll see in anime. And with that being said, let's talk a little bit about the plot of the show. Now, essentially, I mean, the plot, it kind of goes along a little bit more so along the lines of what I was talking about with Hinata and Kageyama, with how they had met together here and there before high school, and now are getting into high school. But now they have to find a way to work together now that they're on the same team. And as things progress, you get to meet other characters that are added to the roster, but they find that Karasuno High School is not nearly as much of a powerhouse in volleyball as it was back when Hinata was looking at the little giant here and there, back when they had that years prior. This ends up being a huge problem here and there for the players in the Karasuno High School team, and you have one of those things where a lot of the upperclassmen, although they are really good players in their own right, the organization over there is a little bit lacking. The coaching staff is not nearly up to the standards that it was in prior years, and even though their equipment manager, Kyoko, who's wonderful by the way, even though they have her and whatnot, the organization just isn't there for the high school. That's when the team's advisor Takeda essentially tries to go out and convince Keishin Ukai to be the next coach of the team, and Ukai's significance is that he's the grandson of perhaps one of the greatest volleyball coaches in the entire region. He also happens to be the coach that they did have prior to, as they were going into a lot of their winning seasons, so they're trying to get that spirit, that fire, that energy back. And all the while, as the coaching staff is being rebuilt and also the team is kind of coming into their own, you do see a lot of different things happening between the guys here and there about how they're learning to work together, but they're also growing together as friends. But the team is still determined. They're still determined to leave their mark in volleyball, and especially so when the team discovers Hinata and Kageyama also have that quick attack here and there that they do here and there as they kind of learn how to work together with each other. The other players in the team eventually find their places here and there, not only among the team, but also among their larger friend group that's forming around them, and it's one of those things where they're starting to prepare here and there to be now a serious volleyball club. They then get into an exhibition match here and there to really test exactly how exactly they're going to be doing, and it's one of those things where they actually surprise themselves here and there about how well they actually do. And although I won't spoil it for you guys here and there about the times that they do win and the times that they do lose, they actually do have both those instances. But one thing the show again also does well is the fact that whenever they have a win or a loss, it's appropriately felt among the entire team. It's another thing that I feel personally here and there for me, because in high school I was on the football team, and whenever you had different wins or losses, you had like different opportunities to feel how that passion come through. Whether it was good or bad or anything, you kind of learn and grew from it. And it's the same thing that happens to the guys in this volleyball team, and it's one of those things where the way it's presented to us, the audience, we feel that right along with the team. And now, let's talk about the production quality and the soundtrack of this anime, and holy crap, we've got a lot to talk about. I have to give a huge nod to series director Mitsunaka for putting this whole thing together. This guy absolutely knocked this one out of the park. For one thing, when you're talking about production quality in this thing, this is one that I'm actually going to be touching upon a little bit more so compared to my other different reviews here and there, and there's a big reason why. Mitsunaka's production team actually took different bits of footage here and there from a lot of different peoples from volleyball, and they would try to translate that here and there into anime format. Now again, as most people who watch anime are familiar with, a lot of the characters when in action animes are usually doing some sort of like exaggerated expressions here and there when they wind up in an attack or execute an attack, or whether they're like doing some crazy expressions here and there like leading up to it or something. Haikyuu does have that in certain pockets, but it's actually more focused on real physics and how the sport of volleyball is actually played. This team did their homework here and there about what was actually possible for human beings to accomplish, so it's not like they're crazy Super Saiyans who are teleporting all over the entire world, but rather it's, okay, can a human being actually make this jump? Can they hit this spike? Can they actually block a different shot here and there? They did their homework exactly like looking through all of this and planning all of this stuff out so as to where exactly everyone of the players are. And again, with the rotations that they do throughout the show, it all makes sense, but as soon as you see a lot of the different attack patterns that they do line up. Between the volleyball court and the net, everything is also drawn out and appropriately placed here and there. As far as like an artistic standpoint, the perspective that's also drawn on the volleyball court in the anime itself is pretty much to scale for a high school Japanese volleyball court. And if you didn't think that was brilliant enough, check out the sound editing for the show as well, because when you hear a lot of the different things like the scraping of shoes against the floor, the contact here and there that you have with a palm versus a volleyball, all of that was perfectly done, and it sounds exactly as if you're on the court with them. And even as time slows down here and there, as the character starts to internalize what they're feeling at the time, and we see a lot of their flashbacks start to take the forefront, we get to feel that right along with the characters, and it's one of those things where time will slow down, and even like during a tragedy or something like that, if you've heard that expression, time does slow down so that you can get some introspection here and there, but at the same time, doing that is a brilliant form of storytelling, and actually executing it is very, very tricky. Haikyuu nails it in this particular season. And one more can I say about the soundtrack that hasn't already been said. It's absolutely brilliant. I actually discovered a lot of the tracks here and there while I was playing Osu with many members of my community here and there. And it's one of those things where not only are the songs really brilliant, but they embody that hope, that determination, that gut feeling that a lot of people like feel when they're trying to build a team and trying to make their mark in the volleyball world, is trying to like go and do their thing and try to make sure that they can be the best person that they can be. Same thing with like the team too. It's very difficult to put this into words and whatnot, and it's one of those things where even though the songs themselves as standalones are brilliant, when you combine that overall with the imagery of the show, the emotion of the situations that the characters are in, and a lot of the writing that's going on for the plot, it makes for a brilliant mix that you just cannot ignore. And in conclusion, this anime could not come at a better time in my life than now. I mean, 2020 has been a terrible year for a lot of people, and it's one of those things where even though a lot of us are feeling it here and there with the pandemic and stuff, having just a little ray of hope is one thing, but Haikyuu Season 1 was an entire explosion. I see a lot of people give their input here and there in review boards and also on Twitter and several other different places about what they feel about the show, and for me personally it really hits home because as I've gone through a lot of those same emotions here and there being in the football team and the track team in high school, you do get to feel a lot of that sense of, hey, sometimes you have different rival schools in middle school that just come together here and there and oh crap, we are now in the same high school, we have to somehow work together and whatnot. I felt a lot of those emotions growing up here and there, same as the characters in this one, so for me it really personally hits home for me. But one thing I will say as part of my conclusion is that this anime without a doubt has put together a perfect mix here and there of taking characters, their backstories, a lot of the writing here and there, a lot of the other different production quality and soundtrack that goes into this, from a lot of the different things that are shown here and there in the volleyball court, a lot of the stuff that's going through their heads, the music in the background, and even like the palms of their hands against a volleyball when they try to spike it. All that in combination together has created a perfect blend that just absolutely explodes as a sports anime. And again, I'm not a big sports anime fan, but do you have to be a sports anime fan to really truly appreciate what Haikyuu has done? No, absolutely not. Anybody really could get into this show, and it's one of those things where I think they did it brilliantly, and that's why I'm giving it a 5 out of 5, recommending that you not only check this out, you gotta absolutely put this near the top of your list as far as your next viewings are concerned because it is just that good. But what did you guys think of the show? I'd love to hear your opinions about that one in the comment section down below. Also be sure to give this video a like and also hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for notifications. What did you guys think of the show? I particularly loved it. But then again, if you haven't checked it out yet, you should. And with that, I will see you guys soon in the next video. Bye guys!